Before we begin, don't forget to subscribe to our channel, Pause Verve. If this story touches your heart, please like the video and share it with others. Your support helps us continue bringing you more heartwarming stories. When a mysterious thing is found hidden in a child's birthday cake, a loyal Labrador retriever named Max becomes the key to unraveling a chilling conspiracy. The sun hung high over Willow Creek, painting the suburban backyard in a golden glow that felt like a promise of joy. It was the kind of Saturday afternoon that begged for laughter, bare feet on grass, and the sweet chaos of a child's birthday party. Blue and yellow balloons bobbed lazily on their strings, tethered to the white picket fence that framed the yard. A long table draped in a checkered cloth groaned under the weight of lemonade pitchers, paper plates, and a towering bowl of potato salad. Folding chairs were scattered in cheerful disarray, some occupied by chatting adults, others tipped over by kids darting through the grass, their faces smeared with popsicle stains. The air carried the smoky scent of burgers sizzling on the grill, mingling with the faint sweetness of blooming lilacs from the neighbor's yard. At the heart of it all was Liam, turning 7 today, his grin as bright as the red superhero cape tied around his shoulders. He raced across the lawn, leading a pack of giggling friends in a game of tag, his sneakers kicking up tiny clouds of dust. His laughter rang out, high and clear, the kind that made everyone pause and smile, even if just for a second. Liam's parents, Emily and Tom, were in their element, Emily arranging a tray of cupcakes with meticulous care, Tom flipping burgers with a spatula and a dad joke ready for anyone who wandered too close. The backyard was their kingdom, and today it was a perfect one. I'm Sarah, Liam's aunt, and I stood near the edge of the party, a plastic cup of lemonade in hand, watching the scene unfold like a painting come to life. I'd driven in from across town, happy to trade my quiet apartment for the joyful noise of family. But the real star of the day, at least in my eyes, was sprawled out under the big oak tree, his golden fur catching the sunlight like a halo. Max, my Labrador retriever, was 8 years old, with a broad head, soulful brown eyes, and a tail that could clear a coffee table in one enthusiastic wag. He was the kind of dog who made strangers stop and smile, who carried himself with a quiet dignity that said he knew his place in the world, and that place was right here, with us. Max had been part of the family since he was a puppy, a squirming bundle of fluff I'd brought home on a whim after a tough year. He'd grown into more than a pet. He was a confidant, a shadow, a piece of my heart with paws. At parties like this, he was in his glory, soaking up attention from kids who tugged his ears and adults who slipped him bits of hot dog when they thought I wasn't looking. Today, he lay on his side, one ear flopped over, watching Liam's game of tag with a lazy contentment. Every now and then, a kid would break from the group to flop beside him, stroking his fur or whispering secrets into his velvety ears. Max would give a soft huff, his tail thumping the ground, as if to say, "I'm listening, kid. Tell me everything." "Sarah, you gonna join the fun or just stand there daydreaming?" Tom called from the grill, waving his spatula like a conductor. His grin was infectious, the kind that made you feel like everything in the world was exactly as it should be. I laughed, raising my cup. "I'm supervising Max. Someone's got to keep him out of trouble." "Trouble?" Emily chimed in, brushing a strand of hair from her face as she set out a stack of napkins. "That dog's the best-behaved guest here. Unlike certain birthday boys who keep stealing marshmallows." She shot a playful glare at Liam, who was sneaking a marshmallow from a bag by the dessert table, his cape fluttering as he darted away with a giggle. The party was a snapshot of everything good. Family, friends, the kind of day you'd tuck into your memory and pull out when life got heavy. I glanced at Max again, his eyes half closed, his big paws stretched out in the grass. He looked like he was dreaming of chasing squirrels, but I knew better. Max was always watching, always aware, his heart tuned to the rhythm of the people he loved. I had no idea, standing there with my lemonade, that this perfect moment was about to crack open, or that Max was about to show us all just how deep that heart of his ran. The party hummed along, a happy blur of chatter and clinking, glasses with Liam's laughter cutting through like a melody. Max, my golden Labrador retriever, remained the calm center of the storm, sprawled under the oak tree like a furry anchor. His broad chest rose and fell with slow, steady breaths, and his eyes followed the kids' zigzagging paths across the lawn with a kind of patient amusement. I sipped my lemonade, leaning against the fence, and couldn't help but smile at how perfectly Max fit into this scene. He wasn't just a dog at a party. He was part of the family, woven into our lives as tightly as the checkered tablecloth. On the picnic table, Max had always been steady, the kind of dog who seemed to understand the world in a way that made you feel safe. When Liam was a toddler, Max would lie beside him during nap time, one paw resting close enough to touch, as if promising to guard his dreams. At barbecues, he'd weave through the crowd, politely sniffing for dropped crumbs, but never begging, his tail wagging like a metronome. If a kid got too rowdy, Max would nudge them gently, guiding them back to the group with a look that said, "Let's keep the peace, okay?" He was the dog who'd wait by the door when I came home from work, his head tilted as if asking, "Rough day?" "I'm here." Today was no different. A little girl in a polka-dot dress plopped down beside him, offering him a blade of grass like it was a treasure. Max sniffed it, gave her a slow blink, and let her pat his head, her tiny hands sinking into his soft fur. "Good doggy," she whispered, and Max's tail thumped once, a quiet thank you. Nearby, Liam darted over, his superhero cape flapping, and flung his arms around Max's neck. "Max, you're my sidekick," he declared, pressing his cheek against Max's golden coat. Max didn't flinch, just leaned into the hug, his eyes soft and steady like he'd signed up for the role long ago. "Careful, Liam," I called, chuckling. "Max might steal your spotlight." "No way!" Liam grinned, releasing Max and sprinting back to his friends. Max watched him go, then stretched out again, his big paws flattening the grass. I caught Emily's eye, and she smiled. "That dog's a saint," she said, wiping her hands on a dish towel. "I swear he's better with kids than half the adults here." "He's got practice," I said, glancing at Max. 8 years of putting up with us." Tom, flipping a burger at the grill, laughed. 8 years and he still hasn't figured out how to sneak a hot dog without you noticing." "Oh, he tries," I said, remembering the time Max had swiped a bun off the counter and looked so guilty I couldn't even scold him. His sneaky side was rare, though. Max was more about loyalty than mischief. He'd follow me on morning walks, without a leash, never straying more than a few steps, and when thunderstorms rolled in, he'd press his warm bulk against my side, as if to say, "We'll get through this together." At night, he slept at the foot of my bed, his soft snores a reminder that I was never alone. As the party buzzed on, Max's calm presence felt like the heartbeat of the day. A toddler wobbled over, offering him a soggy cracker, and Max took it gently, his lips barely grazing the kid's fingers. The parents laughed, snapping photos, and I felt a swell of pride. Max wasn't just well-behaved, he was a magnet for trust, drawing people in with his quiet strength. Even the neighborhood cats, who hissed at anything that moved, would slink past Max without a fuss, like they knew he wasn't worth the fight. I set my cup down and crouched beside him, scratching behind his ears. His fur was warm from the sun, and he leaned into my hand, letting out a contented huff. "You're the real MVP, buddy," I whispered. Max's eyes met mine, deep and knowing, and for a moment it was just us, two old friends in the middle of a perfect day. I had no idea that in a few minutes that calm would shatter, or that Max's steady heart was about to prove it could beat for more than just love. The party was in full swing, a kaleidoscope of color and sound under the willow. "Creek, son!" Liam and his friends shrieked with delight, weaving through the yard in a chaotic game of freeze tag, while adults swapped stories over plates of grilled corn and burgers. I stood near the dessert table, chatting with a neighbor about her new garden when Emily emerged from the house, balancing a cake that looked like it belonged in a magazine. It was a masterpiece, 3 tiers of vanilla sponge, frosted in vibrant blue, topped with a plastic superhero figurine that matched Liam's cape. The crowd let out a collective ooh as she set it on the table, the candles flickering in the breeze. "Liam, come on, birthday boy," Emily called, her voice bright with pride. Liam skidded to a stop, his cheeks flushed, and bounded toward the table, his friends trailing like a giggling comet tail. I glanced at Max, expecting him to be dozing under the oak tree, but he wasn't. He was on his feet, his golden fur catching the sunlight, his head tilted at an angle I knew too well. His ears were perked, his body tense, and his eyes were locked on the cake. I frowned, stepping closer. Max was never one to fuss, not at parties, not ever. But now a low rumble started in his chest, a growl so deep it seemed to vibrate the air. "Max, what's up, buddy?" I said, keeping my tone light, but my stomach gave a little twist. He didn't look at me. His gaze stayed fixed on the cake, and the growl grew louder, rolling into a sharp, insistent bark. Heads turned, the kids froze mid-game, and Emily's smile faltered. "Sarah, is he okay?" she asked, her hands stilling on the cake knife. "He's fine," I said, more to myself than her, hurrying over to Max. "Probably just smells the frosting or something." But Max wasn't fine. His hackles were up, a ridge of fur bristling along his back, and he took a step toward the table, barking again, loud, urgent, the kind of sound that made your heart skip. Liam, standing closest to the cake, looked from Max to me, his eyes wide. "Aunt Sarah, why's Max mad?" "He's not mad, buddy," I said, but my voice sounded thin, unconvincing. I grabbed Max's collar, expecting him to settle at my touch, but he pulled against me, his muscles taut. The crowd was quiet, now all eyes on us, and I felt a flush of embarrassment. Max was the good dog, the one who never made a scene. What was this? "Max, sit," I said firmly, but he ignored me, a first in all our years together. His barks grew frantic, and before I could tighten my grip, he lunged. Not at anyone, thank God, but at the cake. His big paws hit the table, and with one powerful swipe, he sent the whole thing crashing to the grass. Frosting splattered, the superhero figurine rolled into a flower bed, and the cake split open like a broken promise. Gasps rippled through the party. Liam let out a small, stunned "Oh!" and Emily yelped, stepping back. Tom dropped his spatula, already moving toward us, his face a mix of confusion and alarm. "Max!" I shouted, yanking him back, my heart pounding. He sat then, but his eyes stayed on the wreckage, his chest heaving. I knelt beside him, my hands shaking as I checked his collar, his face, anything to understand what had just happened. "What is wrong with you?" I whispered, but Max only whined, a soft, anxious sound, and nudged my hand toward the cake. Tom crouched by the mess, poking at it with a plastic fork. "Sarah, come look at this," he said, his voice low. I leaned over, still holding Max's collar, and saw it, a glint of something unnatural amid the crumbs and blue frosting. It wasn't a candle or a decoration. It was a small, black plastic object, no bigger than a key fob half buried in the cake's core. My breath caught. "What the hell is that?" I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Emily's hand flew to her mouth. "Is that supposed to be there?" she asked, her eyes darting from the object to me. The kids were being herded toward the house by a quick-thinking neighbor, and the adults clustered closer, murmuring. Max growled again, softer now, but his gaze never wavered. Whatever that thing was, he'd known it didn't belong. And in that moment, with the party unraveling and my dog trembling beside me, I realized something was terribly, dangerously wrong. The backyard, moments ago a canvas of joy, now felt like a stage where the lights had gone dim. The smashed cake lay in a heap of blue frosting and crumbs, its secret exposed, a small black plastic object glinting in the grass. Max sat beside me, his golden fur still bristled, his low growl a steady hum that kept everyone at a distance. Liam's friends were inside now, their chatter muffled through the screen door, while the adults stood in a loose semicircle, their faces a mix of shock and unease. Emily clutched Tom's arm, her eyes fixed on the strange device, and Liam peeked out from behind her, his superhero cape drooping. "Aunt Sarah," he whispered. "Did Max break my cake for that?" I swallowed hard, my hand resting on Max's head, his warmth grounding me. "I think he did, buddy," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. But my mind was racing. What was that thing? A toy, a mistake, something worse? Max's reaction, his barking, his lunge, told me it wasn't harmless, and the knot in my stomach agreed. Tom, still crouched by the cake, reached for the object with his fork, but I grabbed his wrist. "Don't," I said sharply. "We don't know what it is. He froze, his eyes meeting mine, and I saw my own fear reflected there. He nodded, setting the fork down, and stood, brushing grass from his knees. "We need to call someone," he said, his voice tight. "Police, maybe?" "Already on it," I said, pulling out my phone with shaking hands. I dialed 911, my heart thudding as the line rang. Max leaned against my leg, his growl fading to a soft whine, but his eyes never left the cake. When the dispatcher answered, I stumbled over my words. "Hi, I'm at a birthday party and my dog, he knocked over the cake and there's something inside it, a plastic thing like a device. He went crazy, barking, and I don't know what it is, but it doesn't. Look right." The dispatcher's voice was calm, asking for our address, the number of people present, and if anyone was hurt. "No one's hurt," I said, glancing at Liam, who was now clinging to Emily's side. "But my dog, Max, he's never acted like this. He knew something was wrong. She told me to keep everyone away from the object and set a police unit. And fire crew would be there soon." I hung up, my pulse still racing, and relayed the instructions to the group. Emily's face was pale, her hands twisting the hem of her shirt. "I ordered that cake online," she said almost to herself. "From a bakery website. It was supposed to be safe, just vanilla with blue frosting." Her voice cracked, and Tom pulled her close, murmuring something I couldn't hear. The other guests whispered among themselves, some stepping back, others craning their necks to see the wreckage. A few parents started gathering their kids' things, their eyes darting nervously to the cake. I knelt beside Max, running my fingers through his fur, trying to calm us both. "Good boy," I whispered, though my voice shook. "You saw it, didn't you?" He looked up at me, his brown eyes steady, and gave a soft huff as if to say I had to. I didn't know what was happening, but I knew one thing. Max had saved us from something, and I trusted him more than I trusted my own senses. Minutes later, the wail of sirens cut through the afternoon. A police cruiser and a fire truck pulled up, their lights flashing red and blue across the fence. Two firefighters in heavy gear approached, one carrying a metal box, the other snapping on gloves. A police officer, a woman with a clipboard, followed, asking for me. "I'm Sarah," I said, standing. "I called it in." "Tell me what happened," she said, her tone professional but kind. I recounted Max's behavior, the growl, the barks, the lunge, and pointed to the object in the cake. The firefighters crouched by the mess, carefully lifting the device with gloved hands. "Looks like some kind of electronic," one said, turning it over. "Maybe a listening bug or a tracker. We'll need to run tests." "A bug?" Tom said, his voice rising. "Like for spying?" The firefighter nodded, placing the device in the box. "Could be. Your dog did you a favor." He glanced at Max, who sat like a sentinel, his ears twitching. The officer took notes, asking Emily about the cake's origin. Emily's hands shook as she explained the online order, her voice barely above a whisper. "I thought it was the bakery on Oak Street," she said. "The website looked so real." The officer's brow furrowed. "We'll look into it. For now, keep everyone back and try not to touch anything else." She radioed for a tech team. The firefighters sealed the box, promising to send the device to a lab. The party was over, the joy drained like water from a cracked glass. Guests mumbled goodbyes, casting wary glances at the cake's remains. Liam clung to Max now, his small hand buried in Max's fur, and Max let him, his body a steady shield. As the emergency crews packed up, I sat on the grass with Max, my mind spinning. A listening device in a child's birthday cake? It sounded like something from a movie, not our quiet little town. But Max had known. Somehow he'd sensed it, and he'd acted when none of us had a clue. I scratched behind his ears, my heart swelling with gratitude and fear. "What did you save us from, buddy?" I whispered. He rested his head on my knee, his eyes calm but alert, and I knew this was only the beginning. The backyard, once alive with laughter, now felt like a crime scene, the air heavy with questions. No one dared voice. The police cruiser and fire truck idled at the curb, their lights casting eerie flashes across the wilting balloons. Max sat beside me on the grass, his golden fur warm under my hand, his eyes still locked on the spot where the cake had been. The strange black device was gone, sealed in the firefighter's metal box, but its presence lingered like a shadow. Liam huddled with Emily on the porch, his superhero cape crumpled, his face a mix of confusion and fear. Tom paced nearby, his phone pressed to his ear, talking in low, urgent tones to someone. Maybe his brother, maybe a friend, I couldn't tell. The remaining guests had trickled away, leaving behind half-eaten plates and a scattering of party hats, abandoned like relics of a happier hour. I stroked Max's head, his steady breathing a small anchor in the chaos. He'd gone quiet now, no more growling, but his ears twitched at every sound. The creak of the fire truck's door, the crackle of the police radio, the murmur of neighbors peeking over the fence. I kept replaying the moment he lunged, the cake hitting the ground, that glint of plastic in the frosting. Max, my gentle Labrador who'd never so much as snapped at a squirrel, had known something was wrong. And now, because of him, we were all staring into a mystery that felt too big for our little town. The lead firefighter, a stocky man with a graying mustache, approached us, his gloves tucked under one arm. "Ma'am," he said, nodding to me, "your dog's got some instincts. That device, it's not a toy. Preliminary look suggests it's a listening bug, maybe a cheap one, but definitely meant to pick up audio. Could have been active for hours." A listening bug? Emily's voice was sharp, almost a gasp, as she stepped forward, Liam still clinging to her hand. "Do you mean someone was spying on us at my son's birthday?" The firefighter's face softened, but he didn't sugarcoat it. "Possibly. We've seen these used in fraud schemes, sometimes stalking cases. The lab'll tell us more. Range, activation, all that. But your dog caught it before it could do much harm." He glanced at Max, a flicker of respect in his eyes. "Smart move, knocking it over." Max huffed softly, as if acknowledging the compliment, and Liam's eyes widened. "Max saved my party?" he asked, his voice small but hopeful. "He sure did, buddy," I said, managing a smile, though my chest felt tight. I looked at the firefighter. "What happens now?" "We're handing it over to the police for investigation," he said, gesturing to the officer who was now talking to Tom. "They'll trace the device, check for fingerprints, and look into where that cake came from." "You said it was an online order?" Emily nodded, her face pale. "Yeah, I thought it was from Baker's on Oak Street. I found their website, or what I thought was their website. It had reviews, a menu, everything. I paid with my card and the cake showed up this morning, right on time." Her voice wavered, and she pressed a hand to her mouth. "I didn't even check the delivery guy. He just dropped it off and left." The firefighter exchanged a glance with the police officer who'd joined us, her clipboard now tucked under her arm. "We'll need the website details, any emails, receipts, anything you've got," the officer said. Her name tag read Officer Reyes, and her tone was calm, but firm. "Sounds like it could be a scam site. Happens more than you'd think. Fake businesses popping up to harvest card info or worse." "Worse," Tom said, his pacing stopping abruptly. "What's worse than planting a bug in a kid's cake?" Reyes hesitated, choosing her words. "Sometimes these devices are used to gather intel, family routines, personal details. Could be identity theft, could be something more targeted. We won't know until we dig deeper." She looked at me, then at Max, who was watching her with that steady, unblinking gaze. "You said your dog's never acted like this before?" "Never," I said, my hand still on Max's neck. "He's the calmest dog you'll ever meet. Loves kids, loves parties. But today, the second that cake came out, he went ballistic. Like he smelled something or, I don't know, sensed it." Reyes jotted something down. "Dogs can pick up things we miss. Chemicals, electronics, even stress signals. He's a hero, no question." She gave Max a small nod, and I felt a surge of pride, even as my stomach churned. A hero, yes, but what had he saved us from? The firefighters loaded their gear, the metal box now secured in their truck. Reyes took Emily inside to collect her order details, while Tom stayed with Liam, trying to distract him with a juice box. I sat with Max, the grass cool beneath us, and watched the last of the emergency crews prepare to leave. The neighbors had retreated, their curtains twitching, and the backyard felt too quiet, like the world was holding its breath. Max rested his chin on my knee, his eyes still alert, and I whispered, "You knew, didn't you? You always know." But knowing wasn't enough to shake the dread creeping up my spine. Someone had targeted Liam's party, our family, and Max had stopped them. For now. As the police cruiser pulled away, its siren silent, but its presence loud, I realized this wasn't over. Max's instincts had uncovered something dark, and I had a sinking feeling we were about to learn just how deep it went. The sun was dipping, low, casting long shadows across the backyard, now empty except for the scattered remnants of Liam's birthday party. The balloons sagged, the tablecloth fluttered in the evening breeze, and the smashed cake was gone, bagged as evidence by the police. Max lay at my feet, his golden fur dusted with grass, his eyes still sharp despite the quiet. Inside, Emily sat at the kitchen table, scrolling through her phone with Officer Reyes, pulling up emails and screenshots from the fake bakery website. Tom was upstairs with Liam, trying to salvage some sense of normalcy with a bedtime story. But the air in the house felt thick, like we were all breathing through a fog of disbelief. I couldn't sit still. Max's reaction kept replaying in my mind, his growl, his lunge, the way he'd zeroed in on that cake like it was a threat. A listening bug, the firefighter had said, in a child's birthday cake. The words felt absurd, but Max's instincts were undeniable. I needed answers, and waiting for the police to call wasn't enough. "I'm going to the bakery," I announced, grabbing my keys from the counter. Emily looked up, her face drawn. "Now? Sarah, it's almost dark." "I need to know," I said, glancing at Max, who lifted his head as if he'd heard a command. "The real bakery on Oak Street. Maybe they saw something, or I don't know. Maybe there's a mix-up." I didn't believe it was a mix-up. Not after Max's reaction, but I had to do something. Reyes nodded, jotting down my plan. "Just be careful," she said, "and call if you see anything odd." Max followed me to the car, his tail low but his steps steady. I didn't argue when he hopped into the passenger seat. His presence felt like armor. The drive to Baker's on Oak Street was short, the town quiet under the twilight glow. The bakery's neon sign buzzed softly, its windows warm with light. Inside it smelled like heaven, warm sugar, yeast, and a hint of cinnamon. A young woman behind the counter, her apron dusted with flour, smiled as I walked in. "Welcome to Baker's. Can I get you something sweet?" "Actually," I said, my voice steadier than I felt, "I have a question. Did you have any orders? For a birthday cake last Sunday. For a kid named Liam." Her smile faded slightly and she tilted her head. "Let me check." She disappeared into the back, and a moment later a man emerged, mid-50s, salt and pepper hair, wiping his hands on a rag. "I'm Greg, the owner," he said. "You're asking about a cake?" I explained the party, the online order, the device in the cake. His eyes widened and he shook his head. "We didn't have any orders for a Liam, I'm sure of it. I checked our books when the police called earlier, but—" He paused, frowning. There was something odd that morning. A guy came in, said he was picking up a cake for a friend. Gave a generic name, Mike maybe? Paid cash, no receipt. The cake wasn't even one of ours now that I think about it. Plain box, no logo. He was in a hurry, wore a cap low over his eyes. My pulse quickened. "What did he look like?" Greg shrugged. "Tall, skinny, maybe 30s. Didn't talk much. Something about him felt off, but he paid and left, so I didn't think twice." I thanked him, my mind spinning, and headed back to the car. Max was waiting, his nose pressed to the window, and when I slid into the driver's seat, he sniffed my hands as if checking for clues. "We're onto something, aren't we?" I said, scratching his ears. He gave a soft woof, his eyes bright. Back home, I shared Greg's story with Emily and Tom. Officer Reyes had left, promising updates, but Emily was already digging through her phone again. "The website's gone," she said, her voice hollow. "The one I ordered from, it's just a blank page now." Tom's jaw tightened. "So it was a scam. They got your card, planted that thing, and vanished." Emily nodded, tears welling. "I should have checked, I should have known. It's not your fault," I said, but my words felt thin. The police confirmed it later that night. The website was a phishing front, hosted on a server that vanished hours after the party. Emily's card had been used for small, untraceable purchases, and the delivery was untracked. No name, no plate, number. But the bug was real and someone had gone to great lengths to get it into our lives. I sat on the porch with Max, the night air cool against my skin. He rested his head on my lap, his warmth a quiet comfort. "You saw it coming," I whispered. "How'd you know, buddy?" He didn't answer, just sighed, his eyes reflecting the porch light. The neighborhood was silent, but I felt watched, like eyes were lurking beyond the streetlights. Max had stopped something dangerous today, and the police were starting to see what I already knew. He wasn't just a dog. He was a guardian, and his instincts were leading us somewhere dark, but somewhere we had to follow. The days after Liam's birthday party felt like living in a house with the windows boarded up. Safe, maybe, but suffocating. The backyard, once our haven, now seemed to hold secrets in its shadows. Max, my golden Labrador retriever, was different too. He'd always been the dog who'd flop onto the grass with a contented sigh, but now he patrolled the edges of the yard, his ears twitching, his tail stiff. He refused to go near the spot where the cake had landed, and when I tried to coax him with his favorite tennis ball, he'd freeze, let out a deep, uneasy growl, and stare at the ground like it might bite. I'd kneel beside him, stroking his fur, whispering, "It's okay, buddy." But his eyes told me he wasn't convinced. Inside, the house was a fortress of new habits. Tom installed motion sensor lights that blazed at the slightest rustle, and Emily ordered a set of security cameras, their red lights blinking like sleepless eyes. Liam, usually a whirlwind of energy, was quieter, sticking close to Max or drawing pictures of superheroes with big, shaggy dogs at their sides. "Is Max still mad at the cake?" he asked one morning, his voice small, his cape now folded in a drawer. I hugged him tight. "He's not mad, Liam. He's just keeping you safe." Max, lying nearby, thumped his tail once as if to confirm, but safe felt like a lie. 3 nights after the party, I woke to Max's low growl at my bedroom window. I bolted upright, heart pounding, and followed his gaze. Nothing but darkness outside, the streetlights casting their usual glow. I checked the cameras on my phone. Nothing moved. Still, Max stayed rigid, his nose pressed to the glass until dawn crept in. The next day, Emily found an envelope in the mailbox. No stamp, no address. Inside was a grainy photo of Max, taken from across the street, his head raised as he watched Liam play in the front yard. My stomach dropped. "Who's doing this?" Emily whispered, her hands shaking as she clutched the photo. I called Officer Reyes, who arrived within the hour. She studied the photo, her face grim. "This is intimidation," she said. "Someone's trying to rattle you." She bagged the envelope and promised to check for prints, but her tone said what we all felt. Whoever was behind this was careful, slippery. Tom, usually the calm one, slammed his fist on the counter. "Why us? Why Liam's party?" Reyes didn't have answers, but she suggested we vary our routines. Different routes to school, no predictable patterns. "And keep that dog close," she added, nodding at Max, who sat by the door, his eyes tracking her every move. "He's your best alarm system." Max was more than that. He was our shield, our compass. He'd stopped sleeping at the foot of my bed, choosing instead to pace the house at night, his nails clicking softly on the hardwood. When Liam went to bed, Max would lie outside his door, his big body a barrier no one could cross without waking him. Emily started calling him the guardian, half joking at first, but it stuck. Even the neighbors noticed. Mrs. Larson across the street brought over a bone for Max, saying, "Heard he's the hero of the block." Max took the bone politely, but didn't chew it, just dropped it by Liam's backpack, as if guarding that. Too, I started watching everything closer. The mailman's linger. A car parked too long, a shadow in the alley. Paranoia, maybe, but Max's unease was contagious. One afternoon, while walking him around the block, he stopped dead at a storm drain, sniffing furiously, before letting out a sharp bark. I peered in, half expecting another device, but saw only leaves and a candy wrapper. Still, Max wouldn't move until I tugged him away, and that night I lay awake, wondering what he'd sensed that I couldn't. Emily cancelled her credit cards and Tom filed a fraud report, but the police had little to go on. The listening bug was a cheap model, untraceable, and the fake website had vanished into the digital ether. The photo in the mailbox had no prints, no clues, just Max's image staring back like a warning. I kept thinking about the bakery owner's story. The man in the cap paying cash for a cake that wasn't theirs. Was he watching us now? Was he the one who'd slipped that envelope into our mailbox? The questions gnawed at me, but Max's steady presence kept me grounded. He'd seen the danger first, and I trusted him to see it again. One evening, as I sat on the couch with Max's head in my lap, Liam climbed up beside us, his sketchbook, open to a drawing of Max with a glowing shield. "He's my protector," Liam said, his voice firm despite the shadows under his eyes. Max lifted his head, nuzzling Liam's hand, and I felt a lump in my throat. Whatever was out there, Max was ready, and he was teaching us to be ready too. But the weight of not knowing who or why was pressing harder, and I knew we couldn't stay in this limbo forever. The tension in our house had become a fifth family member, silent but ever present. A week had passed since the photo of Max appeared in our mailbox, and though the police were still investigating, their updates were thin, vague promises of leads that led nowhere. Max, my golden Labrador retriever, was our constant, his vigilance, a lighthouse in the fog. He'd taken to sleeping by the front door, his big body curled but never fully relaxed, his ears twitching at the faintest creak. Liam drew him endlessly, Max with a cape, Max with a sword, each sketch a testament to the trust we all placed in him. But trust wasn't enough. I needed to act, to turn Max's instincts into something tangible. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the police report from the cake incident, the words blurring. Emily was at work, Tom was dropping Liam at school, and the house was quiet except for Max's soft snores from the hallway. The report mentioned the listening bug's make, generic, sold online, impossible to trace. The fake website was a dead end, and the bakery's mystery man was just a description, tall, skinny Caplow. But Max had known. He'd sensed the danger before any of us, and I couldn't shake the feeling he could do it again. "Max," I called softly. He lifted his head, trotted over, and rested his chin on my knee, his brown eyes steady. "You're not just a dog, are you?" I said, half smiling. He huffed, his tail giving a single thump, and I made a decision. If the police were stuck, maybe Max could point the way. I grabbed my phone and called Officer Reyes. "I know this sounds crazy," I said when she answered, "but can Max help? Like with the investigation?" He knew about the cake. Maybe he could, I don't know, recognize something. There was a pause, then Reyes's voice, cautious but curious. "You're saying you want to use your dog as a lead?" I could hear her pen tapping. "It's not standard, but we've worked with civilian dogs before, ones with strong instincts. Can you bring him to the station?" An hour later, Max and I were at the Willow Creek police station, a squat brick building that smelled of coffee and old paper. Max sat calmly by my side, his tail sweeping the floor, as Reyes introduced us to Officer Patel, a canine handler with a no-nonsense demeanor and a faint scar across his knuckles. "Let's see what he's got," Patel said, eyeing Max like he was sizing up a recruit. He led us to a back room where a table held a few items, a jacket, a hat, a small bag, all recovered from a park near our neighborhood, possibly linked to the case. "These were found yesterday," Patel explained. "No prints, but we think they might belong to our guy. If your dog reacts, it could give us a direction." I unclipped Max's leash, my heart pounding. "Go on, buddy," I said, giving him a nod. Max sniffed the air, his nose twitching, and moved toward the table. He circled slowly, his tail low, his focus razor-sharp. He passed the jacket, then the hat, giving each a cursory sniff. But when he reached the bag, a faded green duffel, he froze. His hackles rose, and a low growl rumbled in his chest. He sat hard, staring at the bag, then looked at me, his eyes urgent. Patel's eyebrows shot up. "That's a hit," he said, jotting something down. "Strong one, too." He opened the bag carefully, revealing a crumpled receipt, a water bottle, and a folded map. The map was of our town, with a red circle around Liam's school. My breath caught, and Reyes's face tightened. "This is something," she said, radioing for a tech to process the bag. Your dog just gave us a lead. Max stayed by my side as Patel explained the next steps. They'd analyze the bag's contents, cross-reference the map with known activity, and sweep the school area for surveillance. He's got a nose for trouble, Patel said, giving Max a rare smile. Most dogs would have ignored that bag. You train him for this. No, I said, scratching Max's ears. He just knows. Max leaned into my hand, his warmth steadying me, but my mind was racing. A map circling Liam's school, the photo of Max. This wasn't random. Someone was targeting us, and Max was the only one who'd seen it coming. Back home, I told Emily and Tom what happened. Emily's eyes filled with tears. He's protecting Liam, she said, kneeling to hug Max, who licked her cheek. Tom was quieter, his jaw tight. We need to end this, he said, before they try again. I nodded, looking at Max, who was watching the front door, his body coiled like a spring. He'd given us a path, but it led somewhere dark, and I knew we'd need his courage to follow it. The police station visit had lit a spark, but it also cast a longer shadow over our lives. Max's reaction to the duffel bag had given the investigation a pulse, but the map circling Liam's school felt like a cold hand on my neck. Back home, the house was a fortress of locked doors and blinking cameras, yet it felt fragile, like a paper wall against whatever was out there. Max, my golden Labrador retriever, was our rock, his vigilance unwavering. He'd taken to pacing the living room at dusk, his nails clicking on the hardwood, his eyes flicking to the windows as if he could see what we couldn't. Liam, sensing the shift, stayed close to him, his sketchbook now filled with drawings of Max standing guard, a glowing shield at his side. Officer Reyes called the next morning, her voice clipped but urgent. The bag Max flagged? It's a gold mine, she said. The receipt was from a gas station outside town, timestamped 2 days before the party. We pulled security footage, caught a guy matching the bakery owner's description. Tall, skinny, capped low. He's using an alias, Greg Holt, tied to a string of fraud cases across 3 counties. The map's worse. It's not just Liam's school. There are other marks, parks, a library, places kids hang out. My stomach twisted. What does that mean? I asked, gripping the phone. It means this isn't just about your family, Reyes said. Holt's part of something bigger, likely a ring targeting kids for scams or worse. That listening bug was probably meant to gather intel, routines, habits. Your dog threw them off. I looked at Max, sprawled by the back door, his ears perked at the sound of my voice. So what now? I asked. Reyes hesitated. We're digging into Holt's contacts, but he's slippery. We need you to stay vigilant and keep Max close. Vigilant didn't cover it. Emily and Tom were unraveling. Emily double-checking locks, Tom barely sleeping. His eyes bloodshot as he watched the camera feeds. Liam stopped asking to play outside, his superhero cape forgotten in a closet. I wasn't much better, jumping at every car horn, every stranger on the sidewalk. But Max was steady, his presence a quiet promise. He'd wake me at night with a soft nudge, leading me to a window where he'd stare into the dark, his growl low but firm. Nothing was ever there, or so I thought. Then came the second envelope. It was slipped under the windshield wiper of my car, parked in our driveway. Inside, another photo of Max, this time at the park, his head turned toward Liam on the swings. A note was scrawled on the back, "He can't watch forever." I called Reyes, my hands shaking as I handed over the evidence. She arrived with a forensics tech who dusted for prints. Nothing again. "They're taunting us," she said, her jaw tight, "trying to make you feel exposed." It was working. That night, Max refused to eat, his nose twitching as he sniffed. The air, his body tense like a coiled spring. The police stepped up patrols, but it wasn't enough. Reyes suggested a safe house, a temporary relocation to a county-owned property an hour away. "It's secure, off the grid," she said, "just until we get a bead on Holt." Emily was reluctant, her voice breaking. "Leave our home." "Because of a cake." But Tom agreed, his face grim. "We can't risk Liam." I packed a bag, Max's leash in hand, and we left under cover of dusk. The safe house, a plain cabin nestled in a pine grove, its windows barred, its doors reinforced. Max adjusted instantly, sniffing every corner before claiming a spot by the front door. But he was restless, his patrols more frequent, his barks sharper. One night he woke me with a low growl, staring at the back window. I checked the cameras, nothing but trees swaying in the wind. Still, Max wouldn't settle, his eyes locked. On the glass. The next morning I found a faint scratch on the window frame, like someone had tested the lock. I called Reyes, who sent a team to sweep the area. They found nothing, but Max's reaction told me the truth. Holt, or someone working with him, was close. The investigation was peeling back layers of a network we hadn't imagined. Holt wasn't a lone predator. He was a cog in a machine, a fraud ring using fake businesses to infiltrate families, planting bugs to steal data or worse. The map Max's bag had led to was a blueprint for something bigger, targeted abductions, maybe, or extortion. Liam's party had been a test run and Max had ruined it, but the photos, the notes, the scratches, they weren't just threats. They were personal, aimed at Max as much as us, like he'd become their obsession. I sat with Max on the cabin's porch, his head in my lap, the forest quiet around us. "You're making them nervous, aren't you?" I whispered. He huffed, his tail thumping once, but his eyes stayed on the trees. He'd pulled us into this fight, and now we were in deep with a threat that stretched beyond our family. Max was ready, his heart as big as his courage, but I wondered how much more he could carry, and how much closer danger would come before we found answers. The safe house, tucked among the pines, was supposed to be our sanctuary, but it felt more like a cage. Every creak of the floorboards, every gust rattling the barred windows set my nerves on edge. Max, my golden Labrador retriever, was our only constant, his vigilance a beacon in the dark. He'd barely slept since we arrived, his patrols relentless, his eyes scanning the shadows beyond the cabin. Liam clung to him, whispering secrets into his fur, while Emily and Tom moved like ghosts, their voices hushed, their eyes darting to the security monitors. The scratch on the window frame had been the last straw, proof that Greg Holt or his network was circling closer. Officer Reyes had promised answers, but the waiting was suffocating, and Max's restlessness told me time was running out. It was just past midnight when it happened. The cabin was quiet, the only sound Liam's soft snores from the bunk room. I was dozing on the couch, Max curled at my feet, when he bolted upright, his hackles raised, a growl ripping through the silence. His head snapped toward the back door, ears pinned, and he barked, sharp, urgent, a sound that yanked me to my feet. "Max, what is it?" I whispered, my heart hammering. He didn't look at me, just lunged for the door, pawing at it, his growls turning to frantic yips. Emily stumbled out, her face pale. "What's happening?" she asked, clutching a flashlight. I checked the cameras, my fingers fumbling on the phone. The backyard feed showed nothing but pines swaying in the wind. Or did it? A shadow flickered, too quick to be sure. Max's barks grew louder, his body vibrating with purpose. "Stay here," I told Emily, grabbing the emergency radio. Reyes had left us. I hesitated, then unlatched the back door, just a crack. Max didn't wait. He shoved past, sprinting into the darkness, his golden fur a blur under the motion sensor lights. "Max!" I shouted, chasing after him, the cold air biting my skin. Emily called my name, but I was already running, the radio crackling as I yelled for Reyes. Max veered toward the tree line, his barks echoing, and I saw it, a figure hooded, bolting through the pines. My stomach lurched. This was real, not a photo or a scratch, but a person, here, now. Max was faster, his legs a blur, and I heard a shout, a man's voice, sharp with panic. I pushed harder, branches snagging my sleeves, until I reached a clearing. There, under the moonlight, Max had the man pinned, his teeth clamped on a sleeve, growling fiercely. The man thrashed, cursing, but Max held firm, his eyes blazing. I froze, clutching the radio as headlights cut through the trees. Reyes's cruiser screeched to a stop, two officers leaping out, guns drawn. "Hands up!" Reyes shouted, and the man went still, his hood falling back to reveal a gaunt face, not Holt's but someone else, younger, wild-eyed. Max didn't budge until Reyes cuffed the man, then he backed off, panting, his gaze locked on me. "Sarah, you okay?" Reyes asked, her voice sharp as she secured the suspect. I nodded, my breath ragged, kneeling beside Max. "Good boy," I whispered. my hands shaking as I checked him for injuries. His fur was ruffled, but he was unharmed, his tail giving a single, weary thump. The officers searched the man, finding a knife, zip ties, and a burner phone. Reyes's face darkened as she scrolled through the phone. "He's a runner for Holt," she said. "Messages here confirm it." They were scoping the cabin. Emily and Tom appeared, Liam between them, his eyes wide. "Max got him?" he asked, his voice trembling. I nodded, pulling him close. "He did, buddy. He kept us safe." Max nudged Liam's hand, his nose warm, and Liam buried his face in Max's fur, whispering, "You're my hero." Reyes's team swept the woods and found a shed, half hidden by brush, just a quarter-mile away. Inside were maps, photos of our family, and a list of addresses, including the safe house. The man, a hired lackey named Derek Voss, confessed under pressure. Holt's ring was targeting families for extortion, using bugs to gather leverage. Liam's party was a trial run, but Max's intervention had disrupted their plan, making him a target too. "They wanted to scare you," Voss said, his voice flat. The dog was a problem. The police hauled Voss away, and Reyes stayed to secure the cabin, her team setting up a tighter perimeter. We huddled inside, the adrenaline fading into exhaustion. Max lay by the door, his eyes half closed, but still watchful, his body a shield between us and the world. I sat beside him, my hand on his back, feeling the steady rise of his breath. He'd run into danger without hesitation, not for glory but for us, for Liam. The threat wasn't over. Holt was still out there, and his network was deeper than we'd feared. But Max had drawn a line in the dark, and I knew he'd hold it, no matter what came next. The safe house felt different after the confrontation, like a battlefield gone quiet. The pine-scented air carried a fragile calm, but none of us trusted it. Max, my golden Labrador retriever, was our anchor, his steady presence a reminder that we'd survived the night. He lay by the bunkroom door, his eyes heavy but alert, guarding Liam, who slept fitfully, clutching a stuffed dog that looked like a smaller Max. Emily and Tom sat at the kitchen table, their coffee untouched, while I stared at the security monitor, the black and white feed showing nothing but trees. Officer Reyes had left at dawn, promising arrests, but the shadow of Greg Holt and his network loomed large. By noon, Reyes called with news that felt like a crack of sunlight. Derek Voss, the man Max had tackled, had cracked under interrogation, spilling details of Holt's operation. The shed in the woods was a staging point, and its contents, maps, photos, burner phones, led police to a warehouse 2 counties over. A raid at dawn caught Holt and 3 associates, their operation crumbling under the weight of evidence Max had helped uncover. "It's over," Reyes said, her voice tired but firm. "Holt's in custody, and we're dismantling the ring. Your dog, he's the reason we got this far." I let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding, my hand resting on Max's head. He looked up, his brown eyes soft, and gave a quiet huff, as if he'd known all along. Emily's eyes filled with tears, and Tom managed a shaky smile. "Can we go home?" Liam asked, waking and rubbing his eyes. I nodded, pulling him into a hug. "Soon, buddy, Max made it safe." We stayed at the safe house another day, tying up loose ends with Reyes's team. The police confirmed the ring's motive, targeting families for extortion, using bugs to gather compromising data, then demanding ransoms. Liam's party was a test, but Max's instincts had turned their plan into a trap. The community caught wind of the story, and by the time we returned to Willow Creek, Max was a local legend. Neighbors left treats on our porch, bones, biscuits, even a knitted dog sweater. A reporter from the town paper called, wanting a feature on Willow Creek's hero dog, but I declined. Max didn't need headlines, he needed us. I took him to Dr. Ellis, our vet, worried about the toll of his relentless vigilance. Max trotted into the clinic, tail wagging, but his steps were slower, his eyes carrying a weariness I hadn't seen before. Dr. Ellis checked his vitals, her hands gentle as she listened to his heart. "He's healthy," she said, offering Max a treat. He took politely. But dogs like this who bond so deeply, they pour everything into protecting their people. He's been in overdrive, emotionally and physically. Give him rest, routine, love, he'll bounce back. That evening we gathered in the backyard, the same place where it all began. The balloons were gone, the table cleared, but the oak tree stood tall and Max sprawled beneath it, his golden fur catching the sunset. Liam ran to him, dropping to his knees. "You're the best dog ever," he said, wrapping his arms around Max's neck. Max leaned into the hug, his tail thumping, and I felt a lump in my throat. Emily lit a single candle, not for a cake, but for gratitude, its flame flickering as we sat in a circle, sharing quiet stories of Max's loyalty. The town honored Max in its own way. The school invited him for a hero day, where Liam beamed as kids petted Max, who soaked up the attention with his usual grace. A local pet store donated a year's supply of food, and Mrs. Larson knitted another sweater, this one blue to match Liam's old cape. Rhea stopped by with a commendation from the police department, a framed certificate calling Max an honorary operative. "He's one of us now," she said, scratching Max's ears. Max huffed, unimpressed, and we all laughed, the sound light in a way it hadn't been for weeks. At home, Max started to relax. He'd still check the windows at dusk, but his patrols were less frantic, his sleep deeper. One afternoon I caught him stealing a sock from Liam's laundry pile, trotting off with a mischievous glint in his eye. The old Max, playful and silly, peeking through. Liam giggled, chasing him, and for a moment the world felt right again. Max had carried us through the dark, and now he was teaching us how to find the light, but I knew he'd never stop watching. That night, when the house was still, I'd find him by Liam's bed, his chin resting on the mattress, eyes half closed but always ready. He'd saved us, not just from Holt, but from fear itself, showing us that courage could be as warm as a dog's fur, as steady as a heartbeat. And as I watched him, I knew we owed him everything. The days after our return to Willow Creek settled into a rhythm that felt almost normal, like a song we'd forgotten how to sing, but were learning again. The backyard, once a place of fear, bloomed with new memories, Liam kicking a soccer ball, Emily tending her herb garden, Tom firing up the grill for a quiet family dinner. The security cameras still blinked, the locks still clicked, but the weight of Greg Holt's shadow had lifted thanks to Max, my golden Labrador retriever. He was our hero, our heart, and as the weeks passed, I saw him ease back into the dog. He'd always been playful, loyal, with a tail that could start a windstorm. But something had changed, a deeper bond forged in the fire of what we'd faced, and it shone in every moment we shared. Max's days were simpler now. Mornings found him sprawled on the porch, soaking up the sun as Liam got ready for school, his backpack bouncing with new pencils and a notebook full of dog sketches. Max would lift his head, giving Liam a lazy lick as he ran out the door, and I'd swear he smiled, his brown eyes warm with pride. Afternoons he'd follow me on walks around the block, his nose sniffing every mailbox, his stride loose and happy. He'd chase the occasional squirrel, barking with a joy that made neighbors laugh, their calls of "Hey, hero," following us home. Evenings were for the backyard, where Max would lie under the oak tree, watching Liam play, his tail thumping like a metronome. Liam was Max's shadow more now than ever. He'd stopped drawing superheroes with shields. Instead, his sketchbook overflowed with Max. Max running, Max sleeping, Max standing tall with a glow around him. One drawing, taped to the fridge, showed Max with Liam beside him, the words, "My best friend," scrawled in blue crayon. "He's not just a dog, Aunt Sarah," Liam said one night, his voice serious as he hugged Max's neck. "He's family." Max huffed, nuzzling Liam's cheek, and I felt my heart swell. Family, yes, in every way that mattered. Emily and Tom were healing too. Emily started smiling again, her laughter bright as she teased Tom about his overcooked burgers. Tom took down one of the cameras, a small act of trust in the world's goodness. They both looked at Max differently now, not just as my dog, but as their protector, their miracle. "We owe him everything," Emily said one evening, slipping Max a piece of chicken under the table. Tom nodded, his hand resting on Liam's shoulder. "He gave us our son back." The community hadn't forgotten Max either. Kids at school begged Liam for stories about the hero dog, and he'd tell them with a grin, puffing out his chest like Max was his personal superhero. Mrs. Larson knitted Max a third sweater, this one with a star on it, and the pet store delivered a giant bag of treats with a card signed by the staff. Even Officer Reyes stopped by, bringing a chew toy shaped like a badge. "For the team," she said, winking at Max, who took it politely and dropped it at Liam's feet, as if sharing the honor. I watched Max, closest of all. Dr. Ellis had been right. He'd poured his heart into protecting us, and now he was recharging, his spirit bright but tempered by what he'd carried. He'd steal socks again, bounding through the house with a goofy grin, or flop onto his back for belly rubs, his paws waving like flags. But there were moments, quiet ones, when I'd catch him staring out the window, ears perked, as if listening for a threat only he could hear. He wasn't afraid, not Max. He was ready, always ready, his love for us as fierce as his courage. One night, long after dinner, I couldn't sleep. The house was still. The only sound, the hum of the fridge. I wandered to Liam's room, drawn by a feeling I couldn't name. Moonlight spilled through the window, catching Liam's sleeping face, his arm draped over Max, who lay beside him on the bed. Max's eyes were closed, his golden fur rising with each slow breath, but one ear twitched, a tiny sign he was still listening, still here. I stood in the doorway, my throat tight, and realized what I was seeing. A promise kept. Max had chosen us, fought for us, and now he rested, his heart as big as the world he'd saved us from. I whispered, "Good boy, too soft to wake them." Max's tail gave a single thump, like he'd heard me in his dreams. I knew then that no matter what came next, storms, shadows, or quiet days, Max would be there, our guardian, our joy. He'd shown us what love could do, and we'd carry that forever, just as he carried us.